Well, let's stay with Russia and Ukraine. We can speak now to Samuel Ramani. He's an associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Samuel, thanks very much for speaking to France 24 today. You heard from our correspondent in Kiev then. There's almost a celebratory atmosphere for some of this news or, at this news coming out of Russia. I mean, Prigozhin has directly challenged President Putin, that's sure. Is this a defining moment or simply a storm in a teacup that can be swiftly ironed out, in your view?
Well, I think it's a very serious challenge. Vladimir Putin mentioned 1917 in his speech, but just underscores how serious this is. He also called for unity of the Russian people. So this is something serious. But I don't think that the Wagner Group, with their 25,000 forces, have enough manpower to actually make a play on Moscow. So maybe they might use the occupation of the facility in Rostov as some kind of a bargaining chip for Prigozhin to get more munitions to his front line or to escape prison at this stage.
I mean, Prigozhin reacted to President Putin's TV address. He spoke about kind of vowing to end corruption, lies, bureaucracy. What do you think he's making reference to? What are his gripes ultimately when it comes to, Russia's defense ministry?
Well, Prigozhin ultimately has had a long-standing rivalry with Sergei Shoigu, and it dates back before the current war in Ukraine. It dated back really when the Wagner Group was created as a parallel military force that could strike deals unilaterally with foreign actors. So when the Wagner Group struck deals with Assad in Syria, over the head of the defense ministry, Shoigu and Prigozhin started having a turf war. And now that the war in Ukraine is badly, Prigozhin is sensing an opportunity to capitalize on discontent with the war and to build a potential power base. So that's really what he's going after. But the very fact that Prigozhin argued that Shoigu and the oligarchs are basically pursuing their own corrupt ambitions and Putin was asleep at the switch and can't control his own country, that was a red line too far for Vladimir Putin.
I mean, as we've seen in the past, Prigozhin doesn't make direct reference to Vladimir Putin. Is that, this idea of the Tsar that's traditionally never quoted, even when, people are upset around them? Or is this a case that he hopes that some kind of middle ground can be met with President Putin? He doesn't want to overstep that line any further.
The thing is, Prigozhin's relationship with Putin is probably what's prevented him from being purged beforehand, right? And Prigozhin and Putin have known each other since their days in New Island restaurant back in St. Petersburg in the late 1990s. So this is a more than 20, 25-year partnership, and it's one that both parties have kept very public. So I think Prigozhin views that the only chance he has, if a coup is not successful, is to make some kind of a deal with Putin. And that's probably why he's basically going on the bad boy or good czar line over here, but also portraying Putin as somehow an ineffective leader who doesn't have control over his own country, and was deceived by the Russian defense ministry into invading Ukraine on false pretenses, like the defense of ethnic Russians or the potential NATO threat.
I mean, I said it earlier with our correspondent and also our international affairs editor here in the studio with us, Samuel, that, Prigozhin has been clear about this. For him, this isn't an attempted coup. He's wanting a march for justice. How far do you think that Wagner could actually go? You spoke about 25,000 troops. I mean, could they make any headway at this at all, or do we expect them to stay at Moscow's control center where they are currently?
So they're doing well in Rostov, obviously. They took over there. They're moving on the axis to Voronezh, Lipetsk, and then on to Moscow on a convoy. But the big question is how much do they have in terms of munition? How much do they have in terms of javelins? Is it true that the Wagner Group have actually been stockpiling weapons for 2 months and then claiming that they don't have munitions just to get more? And also, how many people are they able to pool from the Rosguardia, the National Guard, and from the Russian military, and how many conscripts will join them? So there's many variables. We don't have an answer to this question. It really depends on how many people defect and how much equipment that Prigozhin has actually stored over the past several months for this effort.
I mean, I started off by asking you whether you thought this might be a storm in a teacup. Think back to a month ago where Prigozhin, had this video that was released. He showed an impulsive side where he was upset about the lack of arms being supplied by Russia. Once those arms were supplied, he kind of backed down and said, actually, I'm no longer going to, form a mutiny with my troops. Could we see a similar response if he's given the assurances from President Putin, or is it too late?
Well, I mean, I think that really depends on how successful this effort goes, because ultimately the Russians don't want any kind of a long struggle between Prigozhin and Putin. That's the worst case scenario. So, because that will distract inevitably from the frontline operations in Ukraine, even if it's not affecting them right now. So I think if this Prigozhin can hold out for a little while, he might be able to get more in terms of bargaining. But also, I think he'll have to accept the fact that the Wagner Group will be more closely supervised and integrated into the Russian command structure, like other private companies. So he'll lose some autonomy, but maybe get more weapons.
A final question for you, Samuel, briefly. Does President Putin need Prigozhin?
Well, I think that Putin used to like playing Prigozhin and Shoigu and Gerasimov all off each other, and Prigozhin represents a large chunk of that ultranationalist base who is discontented with how the war is going. So keeping him around was beneficial for him. But obviously, in his current form, challenging the authority the way he is, Putin is going to want to either silence him, destroy him, or make a deal with him to prevent any further chaos.
All right, Samuel Ramani, Associate Fellow at RUSI. Thanks very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. Thank you.